Everyone, we'll get started in just a few moments. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. And Vivian, when you're ready, you can put the message in the chat. We're going to get started with our talk with Deborah Aschheim in just a minute. Students who are looking for extra credit, Vivian has just put a message in the chat, as well as faculty and staff looking for flex credit. If you put your name and information in the chat, we can get that information to the right people after the talk. So we'll give you a few chances to do that, but that seems to be working very well for us. Just giving everyone a minute to come in. Welcome to Naomi's class. No, you're back there behind Naomi's name. Okay. Well, it's 12:32 and I'm mindful of everyone's time, so I would like to get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Lewis. My pronouns are she, her. I direct the art gallery here at College of the Canyons. And I am so thrilled to welcome Deborah Aschheim today. To get started, I'll do a little bit of business. So the housekeeping about how to get your flex or extra credit is in the chat. Deborah's going to be doing a presentation about her work today, and we'll take questions and have discussion after. So you'll also be putting your questions in the chat that we will most likely be sharing at the end of the talk. Sometimes it's really pressing and we need to interrupt the artist and ask that question. I will also say that I'm zooming in from a remote location, as all of you are too, but there's a chance I'll lose my feed or be kind of laggy or frozen today. I hope not. If that happens, not to worry. Vivian La Fiesta is here to keep running the show. So we'll just keep going forward. But if I disappear and come back, that might be why. So let me pull up my little notes here. First, I just want to welcome you to this artist lecture in our spring artist lecture series with Deborah Aschheim. And I want to thank Patty Robinson and Jessica Edmonds from the Center of Civic Engagement and the co-leads for the PLACE team, which you will hear something about in the talk today, for sharing their work and time with us, along with, of course, Deborah Aschheim for sharing her work with us. Her exhibition is up in the gallery in Mintry Hall, that's 108, the ground floor, until the 24th of this month. So if you haven't actually gotten to see the show yet, you'll be seeing images today, but I encourage you to come by and see the work. Gallery is open Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 10 to 4. I also want to thank my colleague Vivian La Fiesta for all her help with this show. And as always, Dean Jennifer Smolos and the Visual and Performing Arts area for their support as well. Deborah Aschheim has exhibited her work extensively in museums and galleries nationally and internationally. She's received awards from several places, but the California Community Foundation, the Center for Cultural Innovation, Art Tech, and the Durfee Foundation, among others. She's completed artist residencies, really wonderful ones, like at the McDowell Colony, Headland Center for the Arts in San Francisco, the McCall Center of Visual Art, Hall Walls Contemporary Art Center, the Bemis Center for Contemporary Art, Anderson Ranch, and Fundación Valparaíso in Spain. Sorry about that one. Also, really interestingly, and I'm sure Deborah will talk about this, she was awarded the Artist in Residency as a creative strategist for Los Angeles County Registrar and Recorder for the 2019-20, which is a really interesting project that she's done. And for everyone and our students out there, know that Deborah earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in anthropology and art from Brown University and her MFA from the University of Washington. Anything I missed there, Deborah, you think?
The only thing is I know that McDowell dropped the word colony from its name for reasons that are probably obvious to everyone. So just to not call it the McDowell colony anymore.
Brilliant. Thanks for that adjustment. I can make that adjustment. Well, great. So welcome, Deborah. And I got to tell you, I've loved having your show in the gallery, and it's been a delight working with you, getting to know one of your projects up close and personal, in that you've been working with the Place folks here on our campus, in addition to all the Never Facebook drawings that we have and some of your earlier works and the voting 365 days of voters. So it's been wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to having you share more information about your work and what you do with our community here today.
Well, thank you so much for the great introduction. And it's been really wonderful working with you guys too. It's been such a nice timing as we started out installing the show when things were really pretty much shut down because of Omicron. And then like with every passing week, things have opened up a little more and a little more. And thank you so much for texting me pictures of students in the gallery, because when we first opened the show, we just didn't even know if there would be people on campus to go see it. So I want to thank you all for people that have been going to see the show. It makes me really happy to see the gallery full of my work and then people looking at it, because I hadn't had an in-person exhibition since 2019. So I've been mostly doing work outdoors and on social media. And so so thanks a lot. It's been a really great re-entry from COVID for me. So should I just launch into it? Okay.
Yeah, but it is
Okay.
exciting for us as well. And we have had a lot of visitors to your show, and I feel like people are really excited to see work in person and get to engage with it. And so Vivian and I have also been delighted. So yeah, if you don't mind, we'd love for you to start with your presentation, share more.
Okay, great. So I'm going to show some stuff that I'm going to like quickly show things from projects that I'm not going to really take the time to. Okay, what's going on? Can you guys see my screen? And is it now filled with one image?
I see a white screen.
Yeah, so there's something that came on that said whiteboard that wasn't there before. How do I make that go away? Wait, did it go away?
No.
No, we tested this. All right.
White screen.
Whiteboard. It says whiteboard there, and then make it go away. How do I make it go away? Oh gosh, we did a test and this wasn't part of it. Should I leave and come back?
Yeah, just leave and come back.
Okay, sorry guys, I'll be right back.
And you might have accidentally clicked whiteboard.
Yeah.
Something at the bottom right there that you might
Leave meeting.
Oh, it's left altogether. Okay, let's get Deborah back in. Okay. And
I must have hit some wrong button. Sorry about that. That's never happened before. Okay, so now you can see my screen?
absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to show some stuff that's not in the gallery. And then for people who are local, I would really, really encourage you to please come see my show. And also, I would love to invite you. We just got permission that we can have an in-person reception, which we're going to have on Saturday, March 19th from 2 to 4. And then if you hang around at 4, we're going to hopefully go somewhere and socialize a little bit afterwards. So if you can, please come see it in person. But otherwise, at the end, I'll put some links in the chat to places you can see my work online. This is work I was doing a pretty long time ago called Neural Architecture. And I just put this in to pique your curiosity. It takes too long to explain. So I'm just going to say that it was about the blurring of lines between bodies and buildings and smart buildings and buildings becoming more like us. While I was making this work though, something happened. People in my family had been getting diagnosed with some of the diseases of aging that steal your memory. And this began the phase of my work that's been really the past like 15 years, where in one form or another, I've been interested in memory. I decided to set this talk up a little bit as a through line to show you where the work in the gallery kind of came from. So this is my mom's father, my grandfather, Irving Stone. And he was a very accomplished amateur photographer, but at the end of his life, he lost a lot of the memories that he had recorded on film. And it was terrifying to watch members of my family get erased by Alzheimer's and these diseases of memory. But we had a huge archive of pictures and video. What wasn't video, it was 8mm film that we transferred to video, that my dad shot and that my grandfather shot. And when I would look at pictures like this is me and my little sister, Susan, who's 3 years younger, at really the peak of cuteness that we ever were. And I don't remember this. I think we're at the Charles River in Boston. It doesn't bother me at all to think about the first 3 to 5 years of life where I had what psychologists call early childhood amnesia. Not stressful at all. I just accept that these are memories of mine that I don't remember. So but if I think about losing memories at the other end of my life, it's terrifying to me. So I kind of thought I would spend some time with these memories that I don't remember, getting comfortable and familiar with them. And maybe that would help me come to terms with the inevitability of regular forgetting or possibly, pathological forgetting. So this is an installation I made in 2006 at the Mattress Factory, which is this amazing museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they give you an entire floor or half a floor and you can do whatever you want. So I decided to embed these little video fragments from home movies that my grandfather shot of my mom and my aunts when they were little, and that my dad shot of me and my sister and brother when we were little. And as you wandered through, it was kind of like walking through my neural networks of memory. This is another installation that was based on all the video that we had of different birthday parties of mine that I don't remember. So this is me at age 1, and my mom, who's here today, was teaching me how to blow out the cake. And then eventually, when I moved through this work, I kind of got to the point with this autobiographical work where I sort of ran out of things that I wanted to do. I started repurposing some of these structures for public art. So this is actually an installation that I made at Amazon.com campus up in Seattle. And it's this idea of these visual networks of memory reconfigured to think about like what smart buildings or tech buildings might be thinking. So this is my idea of what the internet might look like if it was like a growing, mutating organic life form in the bottom floor of technology buildings. And if you, oh, come on. Yes. And then there were videos that looped and some dynamic content. And I had some great collaborators, Deborah Byrne and Josh Rosenstock, who made live dynamic content. You can find more about this on my website. After that, after working on autobiographical work, I collaborated with a really talented musician in San Francisco, and she now lives in Berkeley, named Lisa Mezzacappa. And I was interested in the idea that maybe I could preserve my memory for language through music. Oliver Sacks and some other psychologists write about patients who weren't able to speak, but they could still remember song lyrics. So I had Lisa and a bunch of musicians in San Francisco create songs for my 25 favorite words and then teach them to me, so that if I ever lost my memory for language, if I could remember these songs that were encoded using auditory instead of verbal pathways, I could express myself by singing. And the songs that they wrote were so amazing that we had to create instruments to play them. So this is a song for the word node. And if you go again on my website, which is just deborahashheim.com, there's videos of some of these. And I also collaborated with neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists. Particularly, I had a 2-year fellowship. This is one of my best residencies at UC San Francisco, the medical school of the UC system. And I would go up to San Francisco for a week, about every 8 weeks, and we would do experiments And I would meet with patients who had some of the diseases of memory and forgetting to try to understand memory in the brain. So in this picture, they're putting electrodes on my head and we're going to do EEG. We also did fMRI, which is that big tube that they put you in that shows you what's going on in your brain while you're responding to various stimuli. But I also met lots of patients and went to their homes and tried to figure out what life is like when you're trying to live with some of the diseases of memory. And then after, so after after a certain amount, and then, yeah, this is a scan, one of the fMRI experiments. But then after a certain number of years of experimenting on myself, searching my own memories, excavating a family archive, I got to the point where I felt like it was a kind of enough introspection. I felt a little bit claustrophobic in this small room of the inside of my head. So I started around 2009, 2010, my work took a turn. I started getting really interested in the idea of collective memory, wanting to know if there were things that felt as subjective and as personal and as emotional, and that gave you a sense of mental time travel, the same way that my home movies do. So like mental time travel is the thing that they talk about when you smell a smell or you hear a bit of music and suddenly you're rocketed out of the present and you're re-experiencing something that happened to you. It's the difference between a memory of an experience that you had, which is very personal and helps define the story of your life, versus like Paris is the capital of France, which I must have learned one day in elementary school, but I have no memories of learning it. So I decided to look for collective memory in the shared space of architecture. Like, you know how if you drive down a street and there's a house on that street where you once lived, or you had an apartment in that building, you're always like, that's my house. It's a shared space. Lots of other people have memories of it, but it's personal to you. So this is an installation I made in Seattle. It was based on misremembered modernist buildings from the 1960s that are about the same age that I am. It was part of some work I did called Nostalgia for the Future, that was thinking about things that I felt one way about when they were new, and that I might feel differently about as they become less new. It's also about the failed promises or the unrealized promises of the idea of the future that this kind of architecture told us, like, it's kind of like the Jetsons future, with like robot butlers and jetpacks and flying cars. We have some of that stuff, like we're using it right now, in fact, but some of it didn't exactly come to pass like we thought. And some of it in this weird moment we're in right now seemed like we were living in the future. And now we feel like we're living in the time before I was born again. So this is an installation I made at LAX International Airport. And it was for this part of Tom Bradley International Terminal where people have to walk down this long hallway after a long international flight. And they're not even really staying in LA. They're going to go get on a connecting flight and go to somewhere else, like in Asia or Arizona or some other part of the country. And I wanted to give them a kind of a dream city that was a mashup of misremembered buildings that might resonate for them. Like I figured I didn't know anything about these people. We might not even speak the same language, but I knew the state of mind they were in. They were coming out of like this 14-hour flight, and then they had to deal with customs and border control. And then they were going to sort of go back into a sleepy days for their next flight. And I wanted to give them a kind of a welcoming dream. And so this was up for about, I don't know, 6 months or something. And then afterwards, I realized that because nobody that saw it lived in LA, I didn't get any feedback. So I started installing it other places. And this is the last exhibition I had before the pandemic. This is my my city. It was called Camelot, but now I don't know what it's called. But this is it. This was it in a show called Landmark at the Olson Gallery at Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota. So the other place that I decided to look for collective memory, or for a more shared kind of memory, was in the public space of events. So one of the things that was very interesting to me at UC San Francisco was when people came into the clinic and they were having problems with their memory, and they tended to be, it was memory and aging, so they tended to be a certain of a certain age, they would always ask them, where were you when President Kennedy was assassinated? And it was, and if they couldn't remember where they were, that was often an indicator that something was wrong with their brain. And so I was thinking, what are these shared experiences that are so profoundly personal that they would think that your brain wasn't working right if you didn't remember where you were? For people my age, that would be like September 11th, and maybe March 12th, 2020 is becoming one of those days, where you were when when the stay-at-home order came. Maybe when we look back, the memories of COVID will be like that. So, so I started trying to, this is the beginning of my community engagement. I started working with other people to try to find out about the shared space of memory in public events that we also experienced as personally important events. So I had a residency at Orange County Great Park in Irvine. And it had been El Toro Marine Air Base, and it also had been Richard Nixon's airport when he was president and flew back and forth between Washington, D.C. and the White House. And I felt like it was haunted by Richard Nixon. So I decided to do a project. They invited me to be artist in residence, and I used to go down there every Sunday and interact with the public about their memories of Richard Nixon. So the first people that came to the park were former Marine vets that wanted to see what the city of Irvine had done with this Marine base when they had made it into a park. And they told me stories about being in the Vietnam War and flying out of the base. And some people told me stories about how they got out of the war and their draft number, and a lot of things about the war in the 1960s. But then some people had gone to college to avoid having to be in the war. So they told me stories about being in the free speech movement and the anti-war movement that started in Berkeley in 1964, but eventually spread to every campus. And this is UC Irvine, which had just been built a couple of years before, and the students have taken it over, and they're protesting the expansion of the Vietnam War by President Nixon into Cambodia after he said he would end the war. He instead expanded it to another country. This is May 10th, 1970. So the way that I learned about all the stories I'm telling you a very fast version, is I would make drawings of stories. People would tell me stories. I would go research what they told me. I would make drawings of the things that they told me. People would see the drawings that would prompt other memories. Again, using a cognitive psychology term, what they called involuntary memories, where people would say, I remember that, or I can tell you where I was that day. And what people wanted to tell me about this day, they said it was very important that I understood about Kent State University, which is a college in Ohio, where, like these students at Irvine, the students had taken over the campus to protest the war. And so these are students at Kent State University on the same day, May 4th, 1970, and the National Guard has taken over their campus, and they're sort of facing off with the National Guard. And this is the last picture before the National Guard opened fire on these unarmed college students, killing 4 and injuring 9. And the reason people wanted me to know about the story, they said this is another one of these, again, what psychologists call flashbulb moments, these moments where everything changed. They said everybody found out about this, and it turned the war against Nixon. This is Nixon on another important day, August 9th, 1974, when he became the only president to ever resign the presidency. And these are people right where my studio was, waiting for him to come back, his core, like Trump's base, waiting to welcome him back to Irvine. And so this was the first time I really did a community engagement project. And this was the beginning of what my work has been about a lot since then, which is memory and place, other people's memories, using drawing to get people to talk to me, and making connections between the history of a place and the place and the space that we're in now. So the next project I did, I was very lucky to get selected by the San Francisco Arts Commission to be part of a project that they had called Art on Markets. They have 36 bus stops, like kiosks, like when you see those big posters at the bus stop, and they let artists program them every year. And so they choose 3 artists a year, and you each get to have your project up for 4 months, and they have a different theme. So the theme in 2017 was going to be the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love. And they wanted to ask some artists that hadn't been around for the Summer of Love for their take on it. So I decided to continue doing more research in the image libraries like I had done in Irvine. So I went to the Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley, and I found the contact sheets for the famous free speech drawing that I had made for my other project. And it was so amazing to look through the contact sheets and feel like it was unfolding in front of me in real time. I had a vicarious sense of mental time travel, even though I hadn't been there. So I wound up making drawings about 6 different radical, alternative, or literary, or creative, or social movements in the Bay Area that had been part of the context for the Summer of Love, part of the things that made San Francisco so special that it drew people to San Francisco during the famous sex, drugs, and rock and roll real Summer of Love, when people, came to be part of this alternative place. Like San Francisco now doesn't necessarily seem like as radically alternative a place as it's historically mythologized. So this is a drawing of a mother and child at a Free Huey rally. This, I interviewed people who were part of these movements. So I paired my drawings with quotes. This is a quote from Kathleen Cleaver, who was the Minister of Education for the Black Panther Party, which formed in Oakland in 1966 to protect the African-American community of Oakland from police brutality, but also importantly and less well known, to provide resources that the community was not getting. So the Black Panthers pioneered free breakfast programs for elementary school students, and they had free medical care, and they had free food. A lot of these groups were united by a shared belief in that they could bring capitalism down by making everything be for free, which was kind of a cool idea. So that drawing's in the gallery, and so go see it if you want. This was a drawing I found a lot of the time too, that image was taken by Ruth Marianne Baruch, and it was in the archive at UC Santa Cruz. But some of the images I found were just very obscure contact sheets or negatives that had never really been reproduced. This was a negative I found in Michelle Vigneau's archive at UC Berkeley. She was mostly known for rock and roll photographs, but this was two young people from a Peace March in April 1967. This was a very early gay rights group. It was a group of teenagers who had been kicked out of their homes for being gay in 1966. And they had worked it was a Lyndon Johnson Great Society program with Glide Ministries, but they did various things. And the reason we know about them was that they made a little Xerox zine, and there was a picture in the zine from this protest they did on Market Street, where they borrowed 30 brooms from the city and they swept the entire street to show that they were productive citizens, but also as a tongue-in-cheek protest to the police sweeping them up, because it was illegal to be gay, and they would constantly get arrested for like vagrancy, which meant just hanging around and being outside. And so they were protesting that by sweeping the streets. This is Emmett Grogan, who was one of the co-founders of a sort of a performative art and radical group called the Diggers. And they used to feed people for free in Golden Gate Park. And again, they thought that if they gave things away for free, maybe that would unseat capitalism. And this was from the Great Human Being, which was a gathering of all these groups together in Golden Gate Park. So the really interesting thing was, at the time I was drawing these drawings, it was 2016. I thought Hillary Clinton was going to be president. And I thought that these posters were going to just remind people of San Francisco's storied past, that it wasn't always the corporate headquarters of Uber and other tech companies. But the really weird thing that happened that was unexpected was another important milestone day on November 9th, 2016. Instead, Donald Trump was elected president. And the weekend after that, I found myself suddenly marching in a group of people from MacArthur Park to the LA Federal Building, and everybody was trying to figure out what had just happened and what it meant. And by the time my posters went up in the street, their meaning had changed a lot. Instead of being a kind of a nostalgic artwork about the 1960s, we were all desperately looking to all of these movements to try to figure out, how do we resist? How do we express ourselves? How do we protect vulnerable communities that we now are afraid for? So these drawings, some of these are in the show. These are from November 12th, the weekend right after the election. And these are just people in a crowd, then you can just see the emotion on their faces. It's this incredibly diverse crowd of people that have come out. And, I hadn't been going to protests, and a lot of people I know hadn't been going to in-person protests. And all of a sudden we were standing in the street trying to figure out what to do next. So this was the beginning of Never Facebook. Never Facebook is called that for a couple of reasons. There used to be Republicans that were called Never Trump. I don't think they have them anymore, but I kind of liked that phrase. And also now I'm much more against Facebook. And ironically, I have a bunch of accounts on Instagram, but at the time I was this person that wanted my epitaph to be never join Facebook. And when Facebook was still considered benign and a fun friend sharing space, I wasn't part of it. And so I actually paid a web designer a lot of money to make me an interface that was like Instagram in order to avoid being on Instagram. And because I decided that suddenly the lines were all blurring, and this history of protest that I'd been excavating in these archives and my daily activities were starting to blur together. And that part of my job was to witness and document these events I was participating in. So my friend and I went to Washington, D.C. for the Women's March, and we went to Trump's inauguration. So these were some people that were at the inauguration. These are Antifa people hiding from me at the inauguration while they were doing various kinds of mayhem, like setting cars on fire and giving everybody trying to be in a peaceful movement kind of a bad name. No offense, any anarchists that are listening, but this was a mother and child from the first women's march, which, we went to unsuspecting, and we found ourselves in a sea of pink hats with just millions of people, and it was really kind of amazing. And then we came home and we found out that everybody else was having that experience too. This was the day of the Muslim ban when we all the word came out that we needed to run to the airport with lawyers and other people to support all the chaos that was caused by the sudden, confusing ban on people from predominantly Muslim countries. I saw a woman get off of her flight at LAX with a cart loaded up with luggage, ask for a sign, and just join the march. It was kind of amazing. And then the other thing I started to do too was to get more involved in activism in my neighborhood. And so okay, never mind. I feel like I skipped over something. Never mind. So this was a protest for Christian Escobedo, who was killed by LAPD in El Sereno in 2018, near the neighborhood where my studio is. Hang on one second. I'm going to jump out for a second just to make sure is that okay?
Of course, this
Okay.
is fascinating,
I
Deborah.
just want to make sure that I didn't skip that. No, I didn't. I think I changed the order and I forgot. Okay, sorry, you guys.
No problem.
This was another. I messed up the order somehow, but it's okay. This was a reporter from Univision at a protest where we're trying to ask for the release of a DACA eligible student at Cal State LA who had been picked up by ICE. But what I meant to show you before that, this is all about the same time, but also the other thing that I did after the posters in San Francisco was I went to the Pasadena Arts and Culture Commission, and I said, hey, I did this project in San Francisco, but now it has a different meaning. It's not just about history, it's about wanting to empower people to be activists now. And particularly, I was thinking about high school students who are too young to vote. I said, I want to do a project about the 50th anniversary of the East LA high school student walkouts in order to empower even younger people that can't necessarily participate in democracy by voting. And so they said, well, why don't you propose it as an individual artist project and then go to the Pasadena Transit, to the bus company, and see if they'll let you do it. And it turned out that they had some bus kiosk poster slots that were also set aside as a public service, the same way they had in San Francisco. And they said, sure, if you can get it funded, you can do it. So for this project, I partnered with the Archive of La Raza, which was an influential bilingual grassroots community journal of the early days of the Chicano civil rights movement. And the photographers gave me permission to use their images. And they were activists in the Chicano civil rights movement and photographers for La Raza. And then I interviewed 30 people who had participated in the East LA high school student walkout. So in East LA in 1968, over 15,000 students from seven different high schools coordinated walkouts to protest against discrimination in the schools. The discrimination took the form of a teacher saying racist things to them, being unfairly disciplined, and then really significantly not being allowed to take college eligible classes and being sort of shunted off into these vocational classes. And Pasadena High School, the three high schools in Pasadena had their own similar problems. The discrimination was more against African-American students. It was more Mexican-American students than the East LA schools. But Pasadena's story is like, there was a citywide celebration of the 50th anniversary of the East LA high school student walkouts. And a lot of the participants went on to be really important activists or leaders in educational justice and education reform in their own right. The Pasadena story was less well known, despite the fact that Pasadena was desegregated by federal court order in 1970. So these are, so this drawing is also in the gallery. This is one of the drawings of students at Roosevelt High School trying to decide whether to walk out. And again, like when I was researching this, I had that feeling of time travel, just like with Berkeley. These things that are mythologized, that we think about them almost as if they were inevitable, trajectory towards social justice and progress. When you look at these old negatives, you get a sense these kids don't know if they're going to get beat up, if they're going to get arrested, if they're going to get expelled from school. It felt like it was unfolding in real time. That's always incredibly exciting to me. So, so these are some of the posters. This was from a sheriff's station protest, and I interviewed people that range from Carlos Montes, who's one of the founders of the Brown Berets and is still one of the leaders of Centro CSO, a really important grassroots community group that protects communities in the Latinx community or Raza community in East LA. This poster is paired with a story from Cynthia Olivo, where she talked about leading a protest against Proposition 197, the racist and unconstitutional law from the 1990s that was going to deny public services to any undocumented immigrants, which actually passed. And she said that even having it passed, that made her a lifelong activist, even though they weren't successful in their mission. This was and I tracked down people that told me the stories of the protests, and actually there was a riot at Pasadena High School, and then the school was desegregated by court order. So anyways, one of these drawings is in the gallery, and then they're also, you can find them online. PasadenaTimeTravel.com was the project, and this was the walkout at Pasadena High. I had to dig into the microfilm from the old Pasadena Star News to find the story. Oh yeah, and then also there were posters on all 29 of the Pasadena transit buses in English and Spanish, sharing the stories and images. So in 2019, 2020, I had the great good fortune to be hired to be the artist in residence creative strategist for LA County Registrar Recorder County Clerk, which is the largest and most diverse electoral district in the country. It's larger than at least 40 states. And my job was to use art in outreach to historically underrepresented communities of voters. And that's how I came to get to know College of the Canyons, because I actually wound up doing a project with 10 community colleges in Cal States, where the students from the art communications and design departments of each school wound up doing all of the voter education and outreach for the campus. But this was a project I did that started out as an icebreaker and became much bigger. It's called 365 Days of Voters. And it started when I first got hired. I would go to events with the outreach team of the registrar recorder, and I would just ask people if they would let me take their picture in order to draw them and post them on the registrar recorder's Instagram, along with just a statement about why they vote to inspire other voters. It actually wound up being 757 Days of Voters. And even after my my position ended and the registrar recorder stopped doing in-person outreach because of COVID, I continued doing this project as a social media project. And that's where I lost all control of it, because you can't make a social media project be in LA County, and you can't make a social media project only be 365 people. It's going to be however many people, the people who did it, tell about it, the tell about it, the tell about it. So these are all people that sent me selfies. And at the end, I was drawing more than eventually six people a day. And I think the last day of the election in 2020, I drew 36 people. And I posted them every few hours. But these are some of the people I met, and I still can, and they came from everywhere, all over the country by the end, and one person even from Germany. And I still continue to do some in-person outreach. I would register voters at Homeboy Industries, because I wanted to still make sure that I included the voices of formerly incarcerated. And I would go to voter registration events at Echo Park to include people who are experiencing homelessness, and also to food banks down in Compton, because the voices of voters from low wealth communities are also not often heard. So this became my Instagram, which is where I gave up my beloved Facebook virginity, since Instagram is a company owned by Facebook. And you can see all 757 voters and their inspiring stories that they hopefully shared out on peer-to-peer messaging to get people to vote in the 2020 election. If you go to 365daysofvoters.com. Meanwhile, I continue to go to protests. So I don't know if we're running out of time yet, but I'll quickly go through these. Some of these.
You're doing great, Deborah.
Okay.
That is wonderful. So thank you so much. And yeah, let's go. Keep on going if you can.
Okay. So some
Enjoy.
of these drawings are in the gallery. All of them are on Never Facebook. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was murdered by the Minneapolis police, and there were car caravans in Pasadena. So this was the first protest. So I hadn't been going to protests like a lot of people during the really intense part of COVID before the vaccine, but we all, like many people, I made a decision that it was too important not to be part of this movement. So I started going to protests in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And this is Pasadena in front of the city hall. This is it was supposed to be a car thing, but it turned into an in-person thing. This was organized by, I think it was white people for Black Lives Matter, and it was at the Hall of Justice in LA, and everybody was supposed to bring a rose and lay it on the steps of the Hall of Justice to stand for one of the people that had been killed by law enforcement. And so these two women are reading a very, very, very long list of names of people who had been killed by law enforcement. This is another protest in the summer after George Floyd was murdered in Pasadena. This was somebody sitting on the ground at one of the Pasadena protests. And then I also documented, times where people ran out into the street in jubilation. So this was the people celebrating when the election was finally declared for Biden-Harris. This is downtown LA. This is some other people taking pictures and trying to document. This image is in the gallery. The crowds that have come out to celebrate the announcing of the election, and against the backdrop of the rapidly transforming downtown LA, which is apparently undergoing a construction boom that's only rivaled by the 1920s. And at one of the events I went to, it was a pre-canvassing rally in El Sereno Community Garden. So it's about 2 miles down the street from my studio. And it was put on by Black Lives Matter and Centro CSO. And it was to get everybody motivated. And then we were going to go knock on doors to try to get out the vote for the district attorney's race, because people were very unhappy with Jackie Lacey, the former district attorney that had failed to investigate any of officer involved shootings during her tenure. So at this rally, I heard these amazing sisters speak. And so on the left is Stephanie Luna, and on the right is Valerie Vargas. And they told us the story about their nephew, Anthony Vargas, who was killed by LA Sheriff's Department. He was 21 years old, and he was walking home through a housing complex in East LA in 2018, and he was unarmed, and he was shot 13 times in the back. And they're amazing. They're just amazing, tireless advocates. They've become really essential in this movement. And so I drew them, and they wound up posting my drawing of them on Instagram. And I thought, well, maybe I can do more than just go to protests and draw about them. Maybe I can try to support the families that are trying to get justice for their lost loved ones, because I was starting to meet these families, and their stories were very compelling to me. So I started inviting families to my studio. This is the family of David Sullivan, who was killed by Buena Park police. And I thought maybe they could use my drawings of them to get support for their movement, because I wanted people to understand that it was a movement of families, and what happened to families when they lost a loved one in this unfair way, where not only did you lose your loved one, but that the person is often demonized by law enforcement. And so instead of getting grief support from your community, you have to defend the reputation of the person that you loved. But the families also just started asking me, well, could you draw the person that we lost? Because we maybe that would help us to remember them, or we only have social media posts or pictures from their phone. And I realized that people don't take photos and print them out anymore. And so I started making images. So this is Anthony Vargas, and he's just as I didn't meet him, of course, but from everything I can tell, just a beautiful, kind soul, and didn't, absolutely a loss that we don't have him anymore. So I drew him for their family, and they've used it, for to publicize events. But I think the more important thing is just to honor these people who have died. And this became like one of my most important projects. It's not in the gallery because I make these drawings for the families and I gift them to them in hopes that it can help with healing. So I just want to show you a few of these young people. This is Eric Rivera, and he was killed in Wilmington. He was 20 years old in 2017. He had a neon green water pistol. So I made these drawings for his mom, Val, and his dad, Phil. This is Dijon Kizzy. He was pulled over because he committed a traffic infraction riding his bike. And that was in 2020. He was 29. This is his young son listening to speakers at a protest. This is Valentina Oriana Peralta. Many of you have probably heard of her. She was killed by an accidental bullet when police opened fire in the Burlington department store in North Hollywood. She was 14 years old. And Paul Rea, these are the most recent people I drew. And Paul was killed by LA Sheriff's Department in 2019. He was 18 years old. And so I started posting these on just a little Instagram. I haven't tried to publicize it or anything, just for the families. It's just a memorial. When a person dies in this terrible way, I think it's hard to remember them as they were. Everything gets eclipsed by the horrible way that they died. And so, so that hopefully this supports the families' fight for justice for their loved ones, but also to help with healing. And so this is Christopher Vasquez. His brother, Marco Vasquez Jr., was killed by LA Sheriff's Department in Whittier. He was suffering a mental health crisis, and the family called for mental health support, but instead the Sheriff's Department came and they didn't help him. They shot him in front of his family. And so I got, as part of LA County Department of Mental Health, We Rise, I worked with this group called Say Their Names LA that supports the families. And we created these zines that shared these stories. So this is Christopher's story that he was telling at that rally. That's him with his brother Marco, telling about how they reached out for help, but didn't get help for him. And the zines also had resources, alternatives to 911, although we called all the alternatives to 911 to see if there were any where they really wouldn't call law enforcement if you were a danger to yourself or others. And we had to put a caution about calling any of them, but there's great resources. The zines are available in the gallery. There's great resources for non-crisis mental health issues. There's still work to be done to find truly safe crisis resources. And then artwork from these young activists in the movement and people from these families. This is a poem by Gaha Murad. Her brother Faris Murad was an honor student at Moore Park College who was killed. And so these are her thoughts and feelings. And then this is the family of David Sullivan that I showed you earlier. They go every month to put flowers at the site where he was killed. And so they didn't really consider this an artwork, but we just sat down one day at my dining room table and we just put flowers from all different seasons into a grid to give a sense of the ongoing and persistent loss in their lives from losing David. And then so I've been just doing a lot more community projects. I'm going to show you these really briefly. This is a project I'm doing in Raleigh, North Carolina that included, they invited me to participate in a Black Voters Matter March. This was in Raleigh, North Carolina in June. And this is the Place Project at College of the Canyon. So if you come in to the show, you'll see 49 people that I drew as part of this collaboration with the Center for Civic Engagement, which is run by Patty Robinson that you can see in the upper left. And then if you look next to her is Larry Shallert, who I see here today, and Ray Applebaum that has artwork that's in the small gallery that includes some of the art by the students. Ebony, I saw that you're here, so that's Ebony in the lower right. And Pam, who's joining us from Hawaii, wearing the shirt that says "Protect Trans Kids," and Diane Van Hook, who is the chancellor of the college. And this is a sampling of some of the people that are involved from the College of the Canyon side. And then these are some of the community partners. And this is a really neat project because it's part of collaboration that's with other schools across the country. But also it focuses on housing and housing insecurity in Santa Clarita Valley. And so I met Frank Willard in the upper left. He's a volunteer at the senior center. Nikki Feast Williams is an amazing project manager at Bridge to Home, which provides supportive services for people experiencing homelessness in Santa Clarita Valley. Robin Clow in the maroon sweater, she is one of the staff at the senior center. Peggy Edwards in the bottom left, she's a tireless activist. There's some badass women in Santa Clarita. Barbara Stearns Cochran in the Christmas sweater has a radio show for seniors, and Renee, I can't remember Renee's last name. I'm so sorry, Renee, if you're here. We're also working on housing justice. And so this is the last thing. This is a drawing I made just for the show. This is from the annual Central CSO has a march through Boyle Heights on May 1st every year. That's in support of workers and immigrants' rights. And last year we stopped in front of the Hollenbeck police station and made our presence known there. And that's my talk. Yeah.
Wow, thank you, Deborah. We're all applauding. Yeah, that was really
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Well, I'm
yeah.
happy to answer any questions or.
Yeah, so at this point, folks, taking that in, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and we will read them out to Deborah. If it's a question you want to say yourself, we can maybe unmute. We're not a huge group, so it seems we do it through the chat usually, just because if you're like me, I get excited when I'm gonna unmute and then talk, and then it takes a little time. So we've just found by just putting it in the chat, we could like get it done that way. But Deborah, I loved getting a chance. I mean, we've had a chance to talk and you've shared as we developed the show, but I really appreciated the lines, the trajectories that you pulled out through that talk, starting with your earlier work, which is when I first met you, you were doing all the work around memory and making the sort of, synapsy kind of structures, those beautiful sculptures. And I saw the show at the Armory in Pasadena, but really sort of making the connection that you as the artist made from moving from those sculptural installations to these drawings, using sort of memory as a conduit was fascinating to hear. Naomi is here with her class, and she has a question from her class that says, how do you document the conversations with your subjects? Do you record, journal, diary?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do actually, I record a lot and I transcribe stuff. So like, for example, if you go to the website for Pasadena Time Travel, there were quotes that were distilled out of these longer conversations. But if you go to there's a very lengthy sort of archive section of that, because I wanted to preserve the historical record of the Pasadena protest, since there's no real scholarship or books about it or anything. So so the microfilm is there, and also the longer transcripts, so you could actually read the longer conversations there. My friends that are sound artists have always said, why don't I do something with the sound recordings? And we've talked about it. The only thing is I'm on the sound recordings, and so it's not, it seems better, like I can tell people stories without that, except for occasionally having me interrupting. But if you listen to the transcripts, it would be me interrupting a lot. But yeah, I everywhere I go, I guess I'm always sort of like recording things that people tell me. For the online projects, people just sent me little stories, and I would edit them down. But it's usually old school interviewing.
Wow. And how I've had this question a lot in the gallery, because, it's impressive. I mean, even with this, we have a smaller space. And so we had to really kind of, we have a beautiful selection of the drawings, but we have a smaller selection from each set. But I've been asked over and over about how long it takes you to complete drawings of people, because people are so amazed by the number of drawings, like 365 days of photos actually being 700 and something days of photos. But you know, how just that is something people are really interested in too.
So my answer to that is always, it's really variable, because it's like I have good days and bad. And sometimes when I realized recently, sometimes when I have a bad day, it doesn't even necessarily mean I'm not drawing well. It means I'm just so overly self-critical, because a lot of times I'll just get stuck and I'll draw like, well, my dad is the perfect example, but this actually was really hard. I think I drew my dad 10 times, and I just, and I kept sending it to them and they were like, this is awful. And I couldn't get it right. So it took me 2 whole days to draw a 9 by 12 inch drawing of my dad. But then on a different day, I might have just, sat down and drawn 6 drawings that were perfectly fine, and sometimes I just get in a zone. For 365 Days of Voters, we got told on March 12th that they were putting the stay-at-home order in place. And my studio mate and I went to our studios and we filled our cars with all our stuff and brought it home. And so I had this little light table, and I was working at my dining room table, and we couldn't really do anything. So at the time where I was creating like a lot of the drawings for 365 Days of Voters was just this weird time, where I was like working from home and nothing was ergonomic. So it definitely wasn't comfortable, but also just feeling this frantic energy to want to connect with people. And so, and also the more I draw, the faster I draw. And if I haven't drawn for a while, it's slower. So it's really hard to say, but the really big drawings, like in the gallery, there are some drawings that are like 40 by 60 inches. Those take a few weeks. And then the drawings of the smaller portraits of individual people, I can just like if I'm really in the zone and I made 5 in one day, I probably stay at my studio till 11, because I just want to keep that energy going. And there's other days that I go there and I tear up everything I make. If those of you guys that are artists can probably relate to that.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. And also using drawing this way. I mean, like I say, when I know you've done a lot, you've worked in a lot of different media, you address a problem or something that excites you, and it seems that you come up with processes or collaborate with composers or neuroscientists or the registrar's office or whoever you need to sort of get at it, or that you're inspired by to make work. But more about your relationship with drawing, or your choice to draw people in this way instead of, say, relying on the photograph that you took and the conversation you had.
So the reason I wanted to, thank you for asking that, because that gives me a little more time to explain about why I included the project in the Orange County Park. It was the beginning of community engagement, but also it was kind of my return to the sort of illustration style drawing. So that's how I always drew as a kid growing up. I used to love to draw narrative drawings. And I didn't think about them being accessible, but they were accessible. I mean, that was my sensibility at the time. And then I went through graduate school, where, I don't think they teach like this anymore, but when I was in graduate school, you got pretty much indoctrinated into this idea of making your work more sophisticated, which at that time really meant more formally abstract and more avant-garde. And we almost were, well, I see some one of my professors from grad schools here, and she's not guilty of it. We did not get this from Patty Warshina, but the painting teachers, definitely they were from the abstract expressionist era. And I think somehow I got it into my mind that if I was going to be a real professional artist, my work shouldn't be easy for regular people to understand. I mean, I'm just saying that in retrospect, but and so I made things that I think they were sometimes really formally inventive, but they were complicated, and you had to have a certain amount of backstory to understand them. And all of a sudden I had this residency in this park, and the people that were coming to the park were coming for the community garden. They were coming for the auto show. They were coming for their kids' soccer game. They might not like art. They might not necessarily like go to art galleries or any of those spaces as a destination, but I wanted them to talk to me. I wanted them to tell me their stories about Nixon. And so first I just sat there with a little sign that said, "Tell me your Richard Nixon story." And people were like, "I don't have a Nixon story, weirdo, like leave me alone," And so I started making these drawings because I knew how. And I thought they might draw people over. They were almost a kind of a bait, because I was just like, well, I'm going to make these drawings and put them up. Maybe they'll trigger these involuntary memories. And they did. And that was part of it, so that somebody would not be thinking, who is this person? And do they vote the same as me? And do they agree with me about stuff? But just like, oh, I know where I was that day. I just suddenly had this time travel experience that I need to share. And that did happen. But the other thing I forgot was people who may or may not like art, like that kind of drawings. They understand them, they're accessible right away. I liked making them as much as anything I ever made. There was just as much room for me to be formally innovative within the narrative structure of a representational drawing as in something more abstract. My work was never abstract to me anyways. It was based on microscopic neuroscience and other things that I studied. It just kind of looked abstract, and you didn't know what you were looking at. And so people would come over, and they may or may not even like art, but they'd be like, wow, you drew that? That took some skill, or that took a long time. There was something that was kind of cross-cultural about it. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I've spent my whole career, a really long time at this point, making art for this very small percentage of people that would go and, to a destination art space and to put time in to try to understand these rather symbolic things that I made. And all of a sudden I have access to this, like 90% of the people who don't do that, and they want to talk to me, and they want to tell me important experiences and stories from their life. They want to talk to me about lying and ethics and the past, and, and like what we, like the Nixon presidency brought up all these things, and it was just so intoxicating. And so I think that was like, well, that was definitely where I figured out what I wanted to do with public art. I realized I just wanted to have conversations. I think, well, I've told you this, but my background's in anthropology. And so suddenly I was getting to do this thing that I had wished anthropologists did when I was in school, which was have lots of conversations about important things with lots and lots of people I've never met before, that's life experience was really different than mine. And so, so that kind of got me hooked, like whether or not my work is as formally innovative as it was before, the access that I get to like very broad, diverse communities of people making these kinds of drawings, and the idea that particularly the most powerful idea of all, which is that the drawings that I've been making might help people heal from trauma or deal with loss. Like all of that is just very, those were all the selling points of working in this way for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Do we have a question? Okay.
Hi, John.
You can
Your mic is off.
Yeah, let me see if I can unmute you.
Okay.
There we go.
Such a wonderful talk. And the drawings are fascinating. What I wanted to ask you is, how does all your drawings with the firemen fit into this? You didn't mention them.
How to which drawings?
The drawings.
Oh, the firemen. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't, just because of the limits of time, I didn't show a lot of public art projects. So what John is asking about is, I had a public art commission for Santa Monica Fire Department to create art for their beautiful new building that opened in 2020. And so similar to these other projects, I spent like 4 years as kind of the informal artist in residence with Santa Monica Fire Department. It was very fun. This is going to make my job sound cooler than it is. I got going on ride-alongs to calls and eating dinner and hanging out with the firefighters for 4 years. And it was to create these big drawings that got translated into architectural art glass and became a glass curtain wall of pictures in glass of historical fires going back to the Santa Monica Fire Department going back to the horse-drawn apparatus days of the 1880s. And then my own observation of the firefighters doing fairly ordinary things, buying meat at the supermarket, checking the fire extinguishers to make sure that they aren't expired, refueling the rigs. But I spent so much time hanging around with the firefighters, and I did interview them with my tape recorder, that I wound up having all this content for a book, and we wound up having a little bit of extra money. So the Santa Monica Cultural Affairs said, what would you like to do? And I said, can we make a book as part of the public art project? And instead of the public art being something that you own because it's a public building and you can go see it, you could literally own the book. You could take it home with you and you could read it, So so I made this book, and it was things that a middle-aged woman is interested about the firefighters, which might be different than the stories they would tell about themselves. So what I wanted to know was, how do they deal with the traumatic things that they see? And and how do they cope with PTSD? We all know that I don't know if we all know, but I was very well aware of the statistic that the more firefighter lives are lost to suicide than to on the job accidents or things that happen. And then also the effect that having one person in the family have such a weird schedule, where they can get called into duty for 36 hours, what that does to families, and how can people be modern co-parent families when one of the people's jobs is so demanding and uncertain. So yeah, the book I see in the chat, the book is available. You can download it, and I can put the link in the chat. But also, if you want a physical copy of the book, just email the gallery and they'll get the information to me. And what's the best way to do it? I have the book, but I can't afford to send them to people, but I could give it to you. I'm just going to put my email in the chat. I trust you all, right?
Or you can, you could put us, we can.
Okay,
That's
email
fine.
the gallery,
Yeah.
and then we'll get back in touch with you. And if you can pay the postage, you can have the book. But so yeah, so we want to making this 100-page illustrated book of all my sketches and the stories of the firefighters. And the main reason I didn't show a lot of public projects is because it would become, this talk would have been infinitely long. But once I sort of found my big insight that the reason I like doing public art was that I wanted to have a way to have an excuse, I guess, to insert myself into all these people's lives. I've tried to make all of my projects have community engagement and, if possible, an artist residency as a component of it. So I did a big project at Rancho Los Amigos National Rehabilitation Hospital, where down in Downey, which is an outstanding brain and spinal cord injury and disease rehab facility. And I spent 8 weeks there learning everything about this amazing community of wellness and recovery from traumatic injury or illness. And I just try to have that be part of everything I do. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, there's interest in the book, and we have a copy at the gallery if people want to take a look at it as well. Vivian, I think it's on my desk if it's not out front already. It should be there because you were generous to give us one. Deborah, and it is a beautiful book, and I do like it that you collect your images. You have, right, your archives, your living archives online of the memorial images, the 365 days of voters. You have the zines that you make with community members that have health resources and different kinds of things that you can access, as well as your drawings and their drawings. So many different ways that you're distributing and sharing these images. And I have to say, it is really special to see the images as drawn by your hand, as they're shown in the gallery as well. I love seeing them on social media, and I really love the catalogs and books that commemorate the shows. I think they're a really important part of your process and making these things available longer than the period of time that they're in a museum or gallery. But I do encourage everyone to come by the gallery and take a look if they're in the Santa Clarita area, or I'm sure Deborah will be showing somewhere else soon too, to really see these being drawn. And I know many of our drawing students, love drawing too. And one of the things you have as a creative, as an artist, is it's like, well, how do I bring my interests together? Or can I do this kind of art and have it feel relevant or reflect me? Like maybe you learn about cross-hatching in an illustration class or in an art history class, or, intro to drawing, and you're looking at Renaissance drawings that used, or pre-Renaissance that started using cross-hatching. But I agree there, the virtuosity of the drawings, I think brings everybody in. and then the stories that they tell and the people that the choices you make of who you're capturing, who you're foregrounding, who you're giving voice to, add something else that's really exciting and approachable to people because they can connect with that information as well.
Well, there was a part of your other question that I just realized I didn't answer, which was why drawing. And I'm a huge advocate for drawing. And I think that for the students, one of the reasons that I would also advocate for drawing over photography, yeah, it takes longer and it requires a lot more skill, but you can show the world through your eyes. And I think we all have kind of a filter for media images, and we can sort of filter them out. But there's a way that something that you made by hand that you process through your own sensibility. One of the best examples of what I mean by showing through my eyes, like there's obviously editing decisions I make. I draw mostly these days from photographs that I take myself, even though I have drawn from historical photographs. But so like, let's say I'm in a crowd and I see somebody and the emotion on their face moves me and I want you to see that. But there's, and this is going to just sound like almost mystical, like I can't explain why this is, but like I've noticed when I've been trying to make drawings of people that I don't get to work for my own images, the people that that's lives were lost. And first, the families will share photos with me, and I'll see like a young person, and you know how like in our culture, if you're a man, like maybe you're trying to conform to ideas about masculinity, you might like have a pose where you try to look kind of tough or something. So I'll see like a guy in his 20s, he might look kind of tough or something. And then when the family, usually the mom, a lot of the times will tell me stories about them. And, tell me like what a great protector the young man was to their younger siblings, or how they had a great sense of humor, or like what they wanted to be and do, or how they loved skateboarding. And I'll look at the same picture again and it will just change. And I'll see the person that their mom described. And I can show you that. And it's just little things, but I can show you that when I draw him. Like, I think you could see that in the pictures of the kids that I showed. And I don't know how, maybe photographers can do that too. I don't know how to do that with photography, but so like, I think literally, I want to just encourage people to draw, because you can put people in your head looking through your eyes. You can, but not just your eyes, you can show them the world that you want them to see. So I love that about drawing.
That was a great answer about that. I know that at this point it's, I don't know what time it is because where I am, but it's what time is it? We're wrapping things up. I want, if you have questions, I don't want to rush anyone. So everyone is welcome to stay as long as Deborah is available to stay. I know some classes may need to go back, or people need to go on to meetings. So if you need to log off, feel free to do that. But I am really excited we're all just wrapped, Deborah. We want to hear more and more about you. I will just, because we are talking about aspects of drawing, the other questions I get a lot is about Duralar. So that's the kind of material you use as a paper, the substrate that you draw on. So I've actually, one of the pads that you left for us, I put it in the gallery because we have so many people asking so they can touch it and draw on it. But can you talk about why you're choosing that material too?
Yeah. So Duralar is it's like a architect's drafting film. It's a synthetic vellum. And so it's actually like a kind of mylar, and it comes in clear and translucent. And I've used both kinds, and it'll accept wet media and pencil. But what I like to use is India ink pens with it. And the reason I really like it is, first of all, it's translucent. So you could trace things. You can get some of your image from the photograph and not have to have everything be about, translating it from real space with your eyes, so like that, I like using the structure of a photograph to set the image up. That's one thing. The second thing is I love translucent plastic. You can see that in my other work. I just love that feeling of, I don't like paper, the way that it's fuzzy and opaque. And then the third thing is you can get this incredibly crisp line quality. I like to build up value in my drawings by cross hatching. You can really tell if you see them in person. I don't know if you could tell that as much online, but I like to take like many, many fine lines and layer them to create depth. And that's again hard to do with paper. Paper can be really fuzzy. It's great for that. And then finally, the amazing thing is you can also erase back into it. So it gives you the crisp line quality of drawing with a pen, but it also gives you like the ability to subtract and draw with your eraser or change your mind. Like one of the reasons that drawing with a pen is so intimidating is like you make decisions and you can't take them back, but with Duralar you can. So they should probably pay me because I'm such a good lobbyist for it. But it's a great material. For the class that I'm going to come visit, I think we got some right to use with them and just to play around with it. You can also do things like, I don't know if you ever looked at old like Grey's Anatomy books or books with like overlay sheets. You can literally layer it because it's somewhat see-through. So you can draw on both sides of it. You can draw something on paper and then put it as an overlay. So yeah, I mean, you know, I think artists are allowed to do anything they want. And so you can work from photographs, you can trace things, you can project to get your image onto it, you can collage. I like this drafting film. I like all the stuff they have for architecture. I play around with their stuff a lot. I was an artist in residence at a college once that had a quite good architecture school, and that's what got me into this architecture stuff. Vivian, you had a question?
I did. I had more of a comment. Having installed your show and being so close to your work with regards to Duralar, I love the fragility of the ink on this paper as we're installing, because you're dealing with the fragility of these emotions that are behind every story. So the care with which we had to handle it and the care that we had to put it up really resonated with me, the choice of material that we used for it to represent the fragility of what we're talking about. So,
Oh, thanks. It's fragile because it can scratch. But on the and you can crinkle it like any paper. But on the other hand, we had a really janky studio situation once in I guess it was somewhere downtown LA, and the building leaked and everyone else's work was ruined. And because mine was plastic, I could just clean off the dirty water that fell. So, you know, it's it's fragile in some ways, but it's good in other ways. But yeah, I encourage you to experiment with it. With really any materials can be amazing for drawing on though.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful how you use it. It does seem to be really married to the stories too, in a way, and the way you use color with it as well. A couple of other things that have been asked of me a lot, and I want to share with you, but are very different. But one is the fact that you do, like you said, you know, I wanted to use drawings to get people to talk to me, right? You're giving away your drawings to people who have lost loved ones, to help sustain a memory, to help deal with trauma, to help process, to have this information. The intensity of how much you interact with other people has been, I guess a lot of art students feel shy or that maybe they draw more than they would talk to other people. So this notion that, you know, you're doing such important, we're so empathetic and connecting and seeking out to talk to people that you may or may not agree with in terms of like politics, but really just to get people to vote, to help people and their families. I don't know where the question is in there, but that comes up a lot. Have you always been a connector to people like that? Is it a skill you know, it's interesting to me that you would be able to utilize that. I know I'm also pretty introverted, so I'm also like, wow, that's amazing. But it has come up from several students saying, I can't believe she talks to that many people.
I mean, I think I'm definitely an extrovert, you know, I think I found ways to connect with people through art because it gave me an excuse partly during COVID to still have to get to go out and interact with lots of people. And I think I was like really starved for faces. So I just noticed that I've given myself projects where I think I'll have drawn 1,000 people by the end of COVID. I'm pretty close already. And I think I wanted to a reason to ask people to take off their masks, you know? So that's, I mean, I think that is my nature, but also I think like, just like being good at drawing comes from, you know, or even I would say more importantly, being confident at drawing comes from doing it every single day. I think that it's very easy, especially now when we've been away from each other, to feel like it's really hard to talk to people, like, you know, and maybe you're with someone else and you think of a comment you could say, but just as easy right now to not say it. And you have to push yourself a little bit to make the joke or to ask the question. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you are. So when I first was like working at the Registrar Recorder, I was like, what am I going to say to people? But then after I was there a few weeks, it was sort of second nature. But I also think that the art is the thing that makes it easy. So that's the thing I want to tell the art students. And I'm gonna have to tell a story, but I'll try to tell it quickly. So when I was in college, I was studying anthropology and I came to New Mexico because I was writing a paper about Pueblo and Navajo kinship. And I took a lot of classes in Native American Studies at the University of New Mexico as part of my degree. And I was in a class and everybody was Navajo and Navajo speakers except for me. And so like people liked me, but they were mean. Like they would tell jokes in English and then they would tell the punchline in Navajo and then everybody would laugh. And then they'd say I'd have to buy them a beer if I wanted to know the punchline, you know, the stuff, regular stuff kids do. But so we had a final project and everybody was doing a super cool final project, interviewing, you know, having their uncle come that was a silversmith and showing us how to do silversmithing and interviewing their grandmother about their family history. And I was going to do a research project out of books and it just seemed so dumb, you know. So I found all these locations that were mentioned in Native American literature and this fiction I'd been reading by a lot of Native writers. And I found, and there was a lot of place stuff. A lot of the books had a lot of connection to the land. So my friend and I drove around every weekend and we camped at all the sites and I made watercolors. And then I put them up on the wall with the quotes from the books and nobody really cared about my project, but they were just like, wow, you're really good at drawing. Will you draw my husband for his birthday? You know, and like people, you know, this thing, like as an anthropologist, it was always this almost predatory thing that you're trying to get people to let you into their lives. And it was part of why I didn't want to be an anthropologist, you know, where I was sort of trying to get something extractive from people. And I think that can be a bad model that artists can use sometimes too, when they work with communities and they come in and they try to get people's stories and take them for their work. And that always rubbed me the wrong way. But when I put the drawings up on the wall and people saw that I had something like that I could do, and I kind of forgot about this for 20 years, you know, this is what came back to me at the park. Then they were like inviting me in because we were having an exchange, you know, and they were sharing stuff with me and I was sharing something with them. And so I wasn't intimidated because it was a dialogue already. And so I always tell students like art is like a passport. It's great, you know, because like as an artist, I'm telling people stories, but I'm not a journalist and I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not using their story for something. I'm just trying to help them give voice to it or share it or maybe reach a bigger audience, or, you know, if it's a political movement, maybe try to bring people over to consider a point of view that they didn't have. But also like, I get to go everywhere, right? I was never, even if I was young enough to be a firefighter, I'm too small and I'm not strong enough, but I get to ride on the rigs and pretend I'm a firefighter and, you know, or something, you know, I'm not, I don't have to, at this point, spend my life in a wheelchair, but people who have come through onto the other side of that experience are willing to share their stories with me and let me know what was, you know, hard and how they rebuilt their lives and all of these great things. And when I was younger, I think I thought artists were separate from society and they lived in this art world and they spent all their time alone in their studio. And there was a part of that wasn't my favorite part. And you don't have to have that, you know, like you can use art as this other thing, as this passport to be like, hi, you know, can I come in and maybe I can help you share your story, instead of it always having to be, you know, this other idea of art as its own separate thing. Like, so I that's one of the things I wanted to lobby for, I guess, is just like art can be your way to be in the community, to be in society, as opposed to something that takes you out of it. Because I think for a long time, I had trouble reconciling those two things. So yeah, you should use it like as your thing that gives you confidence to talk to people, is like, I'm an artist and I'm here. How can I help? When Trump first got elected, I don't mean to make the whole talk all partisan. But when Trump first got elected, my friend and I reached out to all of these immigrants' rights organizations because we felt like that was a community that was very vulnerable under the new administration. And we said, we're artists. What can we do to help? We want to help. And they said, we need your help to change the narrative. Right now, there's this narrative that ICE and the police are good and that immigrants are criminals and are bad. We need to change that story. And we said, we know how to do that. And we were so grateful, you know? And so I think the part about feeling nervous to talk to other people, it goes away when you're connected to something bigger than that, that you might, like the idea that you might be able to help makes you not nervous. Larry, I see your.
Wow, Deborah, you're just amazing. Beyond your incredible talent, I'm just so impressed with, you know, the way you connect architecture and politics and mental health and trauma and community and emotions and all that together. It's spectacular. And it's just it's such an honor to have you here. And that's what I was going to say. But after hearing you talk just now, I was struck by, you know, being a musician. I have the same kind of thing. I have it's like my passport to meeting people, and same thing with mental health. Since I'm a mental health specialist, I end up talking to, you know, musicians and artists and architects and lawyers, and I get in. I'm able to, you know, get into their lives in a way, you know, and I don't know if it's the same, but I think that was, you know, that's kind of what I was struck with, you know, with whatever our talents are, whatever we're doing, if we can utilize that to connect on almost a metaphysical level with people. And the other thing, there's so many things that you said today that's impressed me, but I'll just throw one more out where you saw, you know, you could draw a tough guy, but then when you hear the mother's conception of him, you could draw it from mom's point of view. Man, that is really cool. You know, that you're able to do that. I don't know how you do that, but that's pretty cool. And I think I get what you're saying. So thank you for this, and thank you for the art, and thank you for connecting with us here at the college. I just hope we get to see you more. Hope I get to see you more.
Well, thank you for coming,
Right.
Larry. And anyone who doesn't know, that's part of the College of the Canyons community. This is a person that you need to know because it's for real. He does help people. Like I've heard so many stories of students being helped by you, like the students that are struggling and they come to you and you get them the resources that they need. So I'm really glad that Pam introduced us and that I know that you're there. In terms of those drawings, it's almost not even anything I do. Like there are a few little technical things that I know how to do to maybe change someone's facial expression a little, but really that's why I said is like, I don't want to sound metaphysical or something, but it's literally the power of stories and like the power of the stories that the family members tell. Because after someone tells me these loving, complicated, you know, sad and joyous stories about the person that they love, literally the picture changes. Like it's
So amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah, I know. And like if I had just seen a bunch of photographs on a desk, you know, but then suddenly I see this, you know, the sensibility. And the thing I always say, and this is going to sound like I'm more spiritual than I am, but like the thing I always want to tell the family when I draw, sometimes I tell them is that after they tell me the stories, I can sort of feel the sensibility or something of the person coming through the photograph. When I used to work with these archives, I would always feel like, you know, and I only have drawn from images with permission, but I always feel like I'm resuscitating them, like they're going to be lost to history or something. And maybe I can bring this moment back to life that would have been lost, especially if it's like a negative that nobody ever printed or reproduced. And I do think there's something in images like, this is going to sound all woo-woo, you know, but there's something that you can, like when you pour so much energy into them, maybe you're investing all of this other energy into them, but there's something you can get in the drawing that wasn't there in the first place.
That's just incredible.
I mean, the stories of the moms are so powerful. I feel like
Sure.
Even if you heard the story, you could just look at the photograph too. You wouldn't need my drawing. The moms and the aunts and the sisters and the friends.
That's so great. Well, thank you. I got to go help somebody that just had a crisis today. So I'm going to go help them. And thank you again, Deborah. Thank you, Pam. and all you artists out here. And I wish I was more like you. We'll see you
We
later.
appreciate what you do so much.
Oh, you're so nice.
All right, anybody who wants a firefighter book, or I forgot I have a website, you can email me through that. So info@deborahashheim.com. I put it in the chat. Yeah, anything or any questions or anything else. And if you're in or near Santa Clarita, come to the reception on Saturday, March 16th, and you can 19th, sorry. And you can, I have numbers dyslexia, and you can come out for a glass of wine at the rooftop wine bar in Newhall with us.
Yeah, after.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning the reception. We're excited that we'll have the gallery open on Saturday. We're not normally open Saturday. So hopefully some folks who can't come during the week, that'll be easier. From 2 to 4, we'll be at the gallery and Deborah will be there and you can see the work and meet Deborah in person if you haven't. And we'll have a few refreshments, and then Deborah's planning. We can go maybe meet together and buy Deborah a glass of wine and chat some more after. So that should be fun. But this was a wonderful talk, Deborah. Thank you so much for sharing so much about what you do and how you do it. Inspiring on many levels. And yes, we'll be happy if you contact us to pass along information about the book or get you the book, but you can also reach out to Deborah through her website, and we'll look forward to being with you on the 19th. Thank you so much for today and for sharing your work with college and your time with College of the Canyons.
Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity. It was wonderful for me to see the drawings outside of my studio and to come back into the world of showing work in person. And thank you all for taking time out of your Tuesday to spend all this time listening to me go on about this. And it's great to see you all, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah.